Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me, to chair this first session, and I really enjoyed this first partnership with my tenant. The Indonesian Economic Forum has been living with the Habibie Center literally because they've moved their office to the Habibie Center building or so. But I haven't got around to welcoming you yet. So I'm very happy that we are here in this beautiful room, the Wisma Habibie and Ainun. And I'm sorry that Ilham is not here. Ilham is the chair of the Board of Trustees, while I'm chair of the Board of Directors of the Habibie Center. And the topic for today is from G20 to ASEAN, the key takeaways for Indonesia. And as we know, the G20, we can, as Indonesians now, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. I'm sure that colleagues from the Foreign Ministry, the first thing is that, at least the party went ahead. Because one of the issues was people concentrated less on the substance and more about whether it would actually take place and who's going to be sitting where and whether there'll be photo ops and things like that. So, the geopolitics, the Russian invasion of Ukraine really got into the spoke or the wheel when Indonesia took over from Italy. So it's in Rome, Sachin, the last G20. We thought that it was just, the usual things, and it's just economic forums, and usually only people who are interested on economic issues, financial issues, would pay a lot of attention to G20. Usually it doesn't really get covered by by the regular media. It will be in the economic sections of the media. But unfortunately, the situation in Europe has really caught our attention. Of course, the crisis, the food crisis, the energy crisis. And of course, as you know, because Indonesia took the chairmanship of G20, that catapulted President Joko Widodo, who, as you know, is not that comfortable playing this huge multilateral role or going into the global stage. But he is very interested on economic issues, and G20 is the one of the multilateral forum that he does pay attention. But because of the fear that the global divide between G7 and Russia on the one hand, and some of BRIC countries who were very sympathetic to Russia on the other, we were very afraid that G20 could not even be held, and Indonesia was under a lot of pressure, as you know, not to invite Russia into the meeting. So it was, it was great that in the end, Indonesia is playing its free and active foreign policy, its middle power role of trying to be a bridge to all countries, that in the end, the meeting took place, and those who had threatened to boycott the meeting did not. There was, as a good host, of course, we do not wish guests to stay away, but I think there was a sigh of relief that the number one from Moscow didn't turn up, so that was easier. But the most important thing is that, the debate about whether there will be an agreement, a joint communique, because it would be inconceivable that there will not be a language about the Russian invasion, and what will be the reaction of Russia or maybe of China. But in the end, and I think this is, we should give credit where credit is due, the work of our untiring diplomats, I think paid dividends here, that Indonesia has managed to ensure its 1,000 friends and 0 enemies, and everybody wanted it to be a success, and then the declaration came. So the fact that there was a declaration is important, but the most important thing is, of course, the substantive issues. And we know that Indonesia tried. It's just like herding cats. Everybody wanted to talk about Russia and Ukraine, and Indonesia said three priorities, about the global health architecture, about the energy transition, and about the digital transformation, and of course, the food and security issues and so on. So next year, as we know, Indonesia is going to chair ASEAN. That's also another headache. Even without the geopolitics elsewhere, the geopolitics in our region is already giving ASEAN a major headache. And then we have our own in-house problem of Myanmar and so on. So today, this morning, I would like to engage in discussions about what the G20 major priorities were and what it means for Indonesia, and what it means, to what extent can we also bring G20's agreements to ASEAN, because all the issues about health architecture, about energy transition, about digital transformations are of course areas of ASEAN concerns. And and this is, I will be very interested to hear, the G20 ambassadors, a lot of them are also ASEAN dialogue partners. So, that will be segue quite nicely. So the proceeding this morning, we'll start with the video remarks from Ibu Ratno. So Sachin, please, yeah. Thank you.
Will continue to haunt. Internally, the situation in Myanmar will remain a huge challenge for ASEAN. Professor Dewi Fortuna Anwar, distinguished speakers and participants, I'm honored to speak at the annual Indonesia Economic Forum today. The topic is very timely as we just went through two significant events in the past 2 weeks. Last week, Indonesia successfully hosted the G20 summit in Bali. A few days before, Indonesia received the baton of ASEAN chairmanship from Cambodia. Allow me to focus on the G20 key takeaways and how this would sustain in our ASEAN chairmanship. Colleagues, initially, the world was very pessimistic that the G20 could reach an agreement for global recovery. But Indonesia has proved this wrong. G20 summit agreed on leaders' declaration. This has surprised the world. Even Global Times said G20 declaration dispels clouds, highlights value of seeking common ground while reserving differences. Indonesia fulfilled its promises during G20 presidency. First, ensuring an inclusive economic recovery that advances the interests of developing countries. This was the first G20 summit where developing nations shaped the global agenda. Second, generating concrete deliverables. For the first time, the G20 has resulted in concrete projects that truly benefit people in developing countries. At least 361 projects are reflected in the G20 action for strong and inclusive recovery. And it is a part and parcel of the G20 outcomes. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, two modalities for the successful presidency throughout the year. First, there is a strong trust in Indonesia. This trust did not fall from the sky. Indonesia worked tirelessly to earn this global trust. It is a manifestation of Indonesia's principle of independent and active foreign policy. Second, the spirit of collaboration among G20 members remains alive. There were deep disparities within the G20. Many even said that the G20 would fall apart, but Indonesia believes the spirit of collaboration remains as clearly reflected in the leaders' declaration. This is the first G20 declaration that reflects different positions but consensually acceptable. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we will bring forward these two modalities to Indonesia chairmanship in ASEAN. In 2023, challenges may not be easier, even more difficult. Great power rivalries will increase, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. The economic recession will continue to haunt. Internally, the situation in Myanmar will remain a huge challenge for ASEAN. However, no matter how hard the challenges are, Indonesia will navigate ASEAN with trust and collaboration. To that end, Indonesia adopted the theme ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. ASEAN can only matter first if ASEAN can address the current and future challenges in the next 20 years. Therefore, ASEAN 2045 must be more agile, responsive, and competitive. Second, if ASEAN can nurture its unity to promote human rights and democracy in the regions. Lastly, if ASEAN can bolster its centrality to maintain peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Indonesia also aims to make ASEAN the epicentrum of growth. Economic growth has and will always be the story of ASEAN. This year, ASEAN economy was projected to grow much higher than global growth. Indonesia must keep up this economic resilience to fight against global crisis. Therefore, we must build a resilient economic architecture that focuses on health, food security, energy transition, and financial stability. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, trust and collaboration among ASEAN members and its partners are of paramount importance. These modalities will lay the foundation for ASEAN that matters as the epicentrum of growth. I thank you very much.
A good introduction that lays out the scene for our discussions. Ibu Retno has stressed the keys to success Indonesia's presidency of G20, the trust and collaboration, and we'll also bring this two key principles to ASEAN collaboration. Now, before our discussions will be mostly offline, but we have some, this recorded message, and Datuk Lim is the next trigger speaker. As you know, Datuk Lim Jock Theng is the Secretary General of ASEAN, and he will share his views about the next year. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. I'm pleased to speak at today's Indonesian Economic Forum. As Indonesia will soon conclude its presidency of G20, as well as assumes the chairmanship of ASEAN 2023, this event is a timely opportunity to explore as we can build synergy and ensure coherence and continuity between its G20 accomplishments with its priority for ASEAN next year. This regard allowed me to contribute to the discussion by sharing some of the recent development in ASEAN, particularly in the ASEAN Economic Community, that may be relevant in the years ahead. Certainly, the past few years have been challenging for the region as COVID-19 pandemic has left a devastating social economic impacts on the livelihood of our people. However, through our collective action, particularly ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its implementation plan, we are now emerging safer and more resilient as a region. I'm pleased to share that ASEAN's GDP is expected to grow by 5.1% this year and 5% next year. Indeed, with a combined GDP of more than $3.4 trillion in 2021, the region has emerged as the world's fifth largest economy and is on track to become the fourth largest by 2030. Despite this, we must remain vigilant as global volatility remains disrupting supply chain, driving up the prices of key commodities, as well as resulting in the rise of inflation. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In addition, ASEAN continues to face numerous emerging challenges that will influence the future of ASEAN community building and its integration efforts. Digital transformation and climate change are chief among them and will have a profound impact on ASEAN economics, community building, priorities, and agenda in the future. Bringing about multiple impacts to the economy and society, digital transformation presents significant benefit to the businesses and industry through improved productivity and efficiency. At the same time, it also raises a range of risks in terms of employment inequality and cybersecurity issues. Towards this end, ASEAN launched the Consolidated Strategy on the Fourth Industrial Revolution last year to provide a clear narrative on how the ASEAN community intends to progress digital transformation and embrace new technologies in a comprehensive manner. Furthermore, in order to ensure effective implementation of the strategy, ASEAN has also developed an implementation plan covering 181 initiatives across the three pillars of ASEAN community to help advance and accelerate ASEAN 4IR agenda and priority, which includes concluding negotiation for the ASEAN Digital Economic Framework Agreements by 2025. Meanwhile, ASEAN is also one of the regions in the most particularly vulnerable to climate change and environmental degradation. To address this long-term challenge, ASEAN will need to pursue a net zero carbon emission as soon as possible. In this regard, ASEAN has pursued a cross-pillar strategy approach to meet its climate and sustainability objectives. While ASEAN Social Cultural Community works towards advancing an environmental agenda that promotes sustainable climate, biodiversity management, and sustainable livelihood, the AEC continues to integrate relevant sustainability agendas objectives in its work streams. Crucial among the AEC-related initiatives are the Framework for Circular Economy for AEC, which aims to guide the region's journey towards a resource efficiency, economic resilience, and sustainable growth, as well as ongoing development for an ASEAN carbon neutrality plan. This regional initiative complements ASEAN member states' efforts to implement their nationally determined commitment under the Paris Agreement on climate change. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with Indonesia assuming ASEAN chairmanship next year, and as we inch closer to the end of the AEC Blueprint 2025, a number of priorities are worth highlighting. First, effective implementation of various initiatives under AEC Blueprint 2025 is key to bringing the regions to its intended destination. With many initiatives already in place, we should proactively take practical steps to ensure that all these commitments and obligations can bring benefit to our stakeholder. Secondly, addressing emerging cross-cutting issues will require a coordinated, holistic, and a whole-of-the-community approach, necessitating closer collaboration across the three pillars of ASEAN, as well as leveraging on existing institutional mechanisms and processes. The recent interface between ASEAN Energy Minister, ASEAN Transport Minister, and ASEAN Agriculture and Forestry Minister held on the sideline of 21st AEC Council on the 9th November 2022 is one example on how various sectors can sit together to discuss areas of mutual concern and common interests. Last but not least, as ASEAN is currently developing its post-2025 vision, it is also important to ensure that the regions will be able to deliver a successful AEC Blueprint 2025, as well as pave the way for the next stage of integration beyond 2025 that is sustainable and future-proof. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today the world needs shared prosperity more than ever. Indonesia's achievement during its G20 presidency has laid a strong foundation for the region to continue advancing community building and integration efforts. I am confident that under Indonesia's able stewardship in 2023, ASEAN will continue to recover better and stronger as we strive towards a more sustainable economic growth and works towards elevating the region's position in the global economy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much to Dato' Lim Jock Hoi, the Secretary General of ASEAN. And so that, the Prime Minister and the Secretary General of ASEAN have really set the tone. I will be inviting several trigger speakers. Trigger speakers are precisely that, just to trigger some ideas. So it will not be long presentations. It will be about 5 minutes, maximum of 7 minutes, but 5 minutes better. And we have a series here. I will just, my updated trigger speakers here. The first one will be Bapak Sidarto Reza Sudipuro, the current Secretary General, the current Director General of ASEAN for Indonesia, formerly Indonesia's ambassador to India. In your list, we have His Excellency Manoj Bharti as the next speaker, but because India is taking over as the chair of G20 next year, there was special request that he will go last. So I think that makes sense. And then we'll have His Excellency Bapak Stuart Donald Cave Coleman, the Ambassador of New Zealand to ASEAN. And then we'll have Her Excellency Kok Lee Peng, Singapore's Permanent Representative to ASEAN. Yeah. It's not in the original one, so I'm sure that, you've just suddenly, exactly, yeah. But we cannot have a non-ASEAN speakers here, because you have India and then you have New Zealand. We have to somebody from ASEAN as well. And then we are going to have Ibu Shanti Samdasani, who's from based in Jakarta, ASEAN International Advocacy and Consultancy. And then we'll have Pak Shuab. He's wearing not his IEF hat here. He's wearing his Singapore Management University. And then we also have a recording by Lance Castle, unfortunately, who's not going to be here. So maybe we'll have Lance before the ambassador. So, so we deal with the Indonesian side, and then we go to, to the next chair of G20. And hopefully, that will cover. And, I'm sure that if there's time, we'll have more free for all give and take as well. So silakan Pak Arto.
Thank you very much, Ibu Dewi. Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to see many old friends and colleagues and meeting new friends. Ibu Ratno and Secretary General Lim Jock Hoi have spoken, so I'll just try to approach from another perspective. And I'd like to start by saying that the G20 that recently had taken place, it was also unprecedented in terms because it is a new context of the world. The world has really shifted. The war in Ukraine is obvious, symbolizes a break in the international system. It symbolizes that the international system will not return to what it was before, maybe the previous 30 years. And also the same is faced by ASEAN. In the past 30 years, ASEAN has been in that period of peace dividends, a period of norms building, institution buildings, capitalizing on the end of the Cold War, and it has transformed into a charter-based organization from previously an association of states into an organization based on charter with supposedly a legal personality. So it's a very different ASEAN today than what it was 30 years ago. At the same time, with the changing context of the world, of the region, and new issues that have come up, issues of climate change, population pressure, and all related issues. The challenges are significant, unprecedented in many ways. The coup d'etat in Myanmar is unprecedented. It has created questions in which the response would also be unprecedented for ASEAN. And you see this manifest in many ways. So now the challenge for ASEAN from Indonesia's perspective is how do we navigate through this rapidly changing geopolitical, geoeconomic context with ASEAN that has been the way it was built in the past 30 years. And at the same time also, how do we fulfill the expectations of people on the ground, of the layman? In Indonesia, the expectation is, why does it matter for us? It's the so what question. So it's within this large context that we come up with the theme of ASEAN Matters, epicentrum of growth. It is the hope that it will address expectations of ASEAN from the various dimensions. It will continue to be the epicentrum of growth. So if you look at what Ibu Retno was saying about how we should vision ASEAN in the next 20 years, so ASEAN 2045. ASEAN's vision, current vision ends in 2025. From Indonesia's perspective, the next vision should be a 20 years exercise. Where do we want to be in 20 years' time? And 20 years, or 2045, is also significant because it is the exactly 100 years since our region became independent, left off the shackles of colonialism. We cannot blame other people anymore for our issues. We are fully responsible for our region. And it should be an ASEAN that is matured, that is a key part of the global value chain, not only a part of other economic centers, but also a center of its own. Datuk Lim Jock Hoi talking about ASEAN today being the 5th largest economy in the world. So we should create instruments to integrate ASEAN even closer within itself and within the region. RCEP would be one of those key instruments. And on the geopolitical side, it is a question of how ASEAN can be a lot more agile in responding to developments, both within the region, within ASEAN, and in the broader Indo-Pacific context, how ASEAN can capitalize on its centrality in its three interlocking concepts of geographical centrality, institutional centrality, and diplomatic centrality. So how do we ensure that our institutional setup is strong enough to strengthen that role in centrality? So I think I might have used all my 5 to 7 minutes. I hope I have not went beyond that. I'll stop there, Ibu Dewi. Colleagues, thank you.
Thank you very much. Since there's a lot of soul searching for ASEAN, recognition of ASEAN's maturity, that it cannot carry on with life always being defensive and apologetic, taking responsibility for its own problems and responsible for action. So you know, some powerful remarks that you made, and how ASEAN needs to be agile and responsive, and particularly, you know, it has to be transformed from an elitist organization into ASEAN that matters to the people. So there's some important takeaways from your remarks. Next, I would like to invite our dialogue partner from Down Under. So Pat Stewart, please, the ambassador of New Zealand to ASEAN.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here with you this morning, and perhaps to offer a perspective of a partner from very close to this this region. Although, you know, when you look at the region from New Zealand, we look at the Pacific, and then we look across to ASEAN. And as others have touched on, it's a region that matters deeply for New Zealand in terms of our own peace and security and for our prosperity. And that's why, you know, very humbled to offer some thoughts looking ahead to Indonesia's chair year. I'm not sure I'm going to have quite the 20-year vision of Pakato, but I will offer a few thoughts coming out of Indonesia's successful hosting of the G20. And I think the first point I'd like to touch on is you know, COVID-19 recovery has been a very big focus over the last few years, but I think as the pandemic starts to subside and come under control, how is growth going to be sustainable is going to be one of the key platforms going forward. And the other challenge that's been highlighted as well as is in the security space and within ASEAN unity. And I think you know, how the situation in Myanmar progresses over the coming year will be a key test for the credibility of ASEAN's response, and particularly with the prospects of elections, and ensuring the region's credibility and integrity will be key there. I think sadly too, you know, the situation with Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not looking like it will be resolved soon. And so, you know, there will be ongoing both the sort of geopolitical break, but also the ongoing disruptions in supply chains, the ongoing food and energy security issues, and of course, you know, likely global recession and inflation and other factors will likely loom large again next year as well. I think in terms of the positive agenda for the year ahead, there's a few themes that I'd like to pick up from Indonesia's G20 year to highlight. I think firstly, a sustainable energy transition, and in particular climate change, I think has to be part of building a strong and resilient ASEAN in coming years. I think the transformation to a digital economy is also another key plank of creating the epicentrum of growth and that long-term resilience. I think Dato' Lim Jock Hoi talked about the fourth industrial revolution, and in terms of ensuring that you know, all people are able to benefit and participate and benefit from that. I think one other area which has built on long-standing interest of Indonesia as well as New Zealand is looking around the blue economy and thinking around supply chains and resilience, around sustainability, around maritime protection, including environmental protection and biodiversity. And I think that's an area where we would certainly be very interested in sharing experience of those conversations in the Pacific within ASEAN, and looking at whether that is an opportunity to build linkages across the whole span of the Indo-Pacific during Indonesia's chair year. So a few thoughts, and I look forward to the perspectives from other speakers as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Stuart. I think that's very important. When we talk glibly about Indo-Pacific, our focus, in fact, is still very much just within the immediate neighborhood and more towards Northeast Asia and now towards the Indian Ocean. But we tend to neglect the Pacific Islands and so on, while in fact now this is an area of intense geopolitical competition with the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiatives that's been launched by China. The Pacific, small Pacific Island countries are very the key target. So I think that we need to have discussion here, because New Zealand, of course, and Australia and Indonesia also have great interest in that parts of the world. So how we can bring this together. Thank you very much for all of these points, reminding us that the war between Russia and Ukraine is not going to end anytime soon. The fallouts will continue. The spirits of cooperation that Ibu Retno talked about, is not going to be that easily developed again, although we are very heartened to see the meeting between President Biden and President Xi Jinping. Hopefully, in the Indo-Pacific, that slight, lowering down of tension, although the structural problems will continue. But, this is still going to be a very dangerous world in which we live in. Now, I would like to invite Li Peng, Singapore's Permanent Representative to ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Devi. A very good morning to everyone in the room and virtually. My name is Li Peng. I'm the Perm Rep of Singapore to ASEAN, not to be confused with Fook Singh, who is the ambassador to Indonesia. I would like to congratulate Indonesia on a successful, sterling chairmanship of G20 this year. Let me share a few thoughts about the challenges facing ASEAN today. I think that major power rivalry has never gone away, but we have had interregnum during the Cold War, where it was very clear which bloc you were in and whose interests you were aligned with. During the Cold War, ASEAN was born in 1967. And why were we born? We were born because we did not want to become Yugoslavia. We were born because the then 5 founding members of ASEAN decided that no, we want to determine our own fate and not have our fate determined by others. I think that this ethos of ASEAN is alive and kicking today, 55 years on. We are now 10, perhaps soon to come we will be 11. And the 10 of us, I think, through the pandemic, we have understood anew that we are more when we work together, and we cannot go it alone. So during the pandemic, we saw a reinvigoration of what ASEAN means to each of us in the nation, in the region. That's for us in the region. What do we mean for our partners? Besides being very adept at forging FTAs and in also proposing projects that will benefit our citizens. ASEAN stands for an open and inclusive region, one that is flexible, one that desires peace, stability, and prosperity. We do not like people to fight in our neighborhoods. And right now our neighborhood is deeply contested. We are purportedly part of an Indo-Pacific construct, while we have yet to come to terms with our own ASEAN Southeast Asian identity. So it's interesting times. And you have to overlay this with the current US-China relationship, which is deeply fraught. I shared Ibu Dewi's relief that President Xi and President Biden had their meeting in Bali. The face-to-face interaction is crucial for both leaders to put guardrails on the relationship. I really liked Ibu Retno's emphasis on building trust. I think this is what ASEAN does pretty well. We build trust with all of our partners, and we also try to do so amongst ourselves, amongst member states. I think we're doing a pretty good job here. My last thought is that Indonesia succeeded in forging the G20 Leaders Declaration. in stark contrast to a week ago in Phnom Penh, where due to forces out of our control, ASEAN for the first time could not negotiate any East Asia Summit negotiated documents. We only produced a chairman's statement on 3 issues. My takeaway from the G20 is that Indonesia has shown resolve and leadership for our region amid a time where we sorely need this. And I'm confident that under Pak Arthur's capable hands and team, we will continue to make good strides next year under Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship. Thank you, Ibu Devi.
Thank you very much, Li Peng. Sachin, I have Jatu Riyandi Primandini here in virtual. Is he coming now or later? Okay, in that case, I would like to invite Ibu Shanti first, and you prepare him, and then we can jump into Shuaib and then later on, okay? So, next, I would like to invite Ibu Shanti Samdasani, founder and CEO of the ASEAN International Advocacy and Consultancy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and those joining us virtually. Excellency, Ambassador Manoj, and Excellency Pak Arthur. I think this is an excellent momentum for me to share a couple of takeaways and observations. Especially, we just concluded G20, and I was one of the co-chair, and our company was one of the co-hosts for G20, so there was a lot of learning. I will not repeat the 3 priority areas, but what I would like to mention is that we have worked at ASEAN Secretariat level for the last 12 years, and I think Pak Arthur and myself, and also during late Kun Surin Pitsuwan's time, this is a perfect momentum for us to really look into how we blend the takeaways from G20 and the current global situation and really drive ASEAN into the new level. It was a strong message we received during Indonesia's G20 that Indonesia have stepped up the bar. Indonesia has always been considered as the big brother in ASEAN member states, but I think this is the time, this is the year for the big brother to take up more responsibility and drive the region into the new heights. I think that's the big message I wanted to share here. Pak Arthur did mention that we need to focus on, and which is also the theme of ASEAN, which is ASEAN Matter and the epicentrum of growth. My question is basically what matters and why it matters. I think this is one of the most important point we need to understand, especially given the global sentiments that we are in, not to mention the war, the threats of food security, as well as the geopolitical threats within our neighborhood, which is the South China Sea. And I think Vice President Kamala was in Philippines, and she did emphasize that US will continue to support Philippines in defending the South China Sea, which is also a very prominent message for us to take into consideration. Yes, we have the Myanmar dispute. That's another challenge on our plate. But how do we also integrate the centrality, as Arthur did mention, with the addition of Timor-Leste? Because from 10 to 11 will not be an easy task. We have to look into the agenda of Timor-Leste and how do we incorporate that into our current ASEAN agenda, which is going to be very challenging. We already have a couple of things on our plate this year. So I think there is quite a lot of opportunities as well. I will not just talk about the challenges, but the opportunities which we see here is to really focus on the current ASEAN economic framework, which is 2025. In particular, and I was working on this since the last 10 years, Ambassador Manoj, I think you may want to know this, that we were working on MRA, Mutual Recognition Agreement, for the last 10 years on really having foreign doctors and nurses practicing. That's one part of focus we have aside from the different areas. We have also been involved in the various trade negotiations, especially during RCEP time. I think Pak Arto knows this, where we were heavily negotiating on trade and services, goods and services. This year, we hope that during the ASEAN chairmanship that there will be a tangible action plan for RCEP. I know India didn't manage to join RCEP at that time, but maybe this could be a consideration as well to expand that into the India chairmanship for G20 or presidency for G20. I think the three priority area, if I may, that we need to focus, and this is our recommendation to the ASEAN Secretariat, is the border and regional defense diplomacy. I think we are walking on a very thin thread here with regards to diplomacy for peace. In the previous years, we see that the regional dispute was at a lower tone. I think this year with Ukraine war, with US and China, with of course India and China as well, and China and Taiwan. I mean, this may not be per se ASEAN agenda, but I think the defense or diplomacy for peace and defense is very much called for, especially around South China Sea. Second is the centrality and relevancy. I think there is a big gap here within ASEAN member states as well, not just within Indonesia, but between Singapore and Laos and Myanmar. There is a huge economic gap and there is a huge growth gap there. So how do we manage this? And this is, again, depends on Indonesia and Indonesia's chairmanship. And I think I will give a lot of support and kudos to Pak Arto to be chairing this at such a challenging times as well. It's not going to be easy, but I think the centrality and relevancy needs to be upheld. And the last here is, I think we need to also create a draft, and I want to emphasize this in this forum, a draft of agreement where we put in the norms and standards of our geopolitical defense, and every country needs to sign it. I know that in the past, with regards to defense and geopolitical tension, countries have taken their own independent stance, whether siding China or siding US and all those things. But I think it is about time we have an agreement, we have a document which says what would be ASEAN's stand, and may not be left to each individual country. This is a strong message that I would like to share here in terms of really maintaining the regional peace and security. So lastly, I think, and I want to again emphasize here, is the role that Indonesia needs to play as a big brother. This is the time for the big brother to step up. What it has done for G20, to step up and show that what it can do for ASEAN as well. Especially paving for the next 20 years and also amidst of all the challenges we have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a lot of food for thought there, among others. We Indonesians and our Indian friends sometimes have disagreements. What does being the biggest country in the region mean? How do we play that up? The strong call for Indonesia to play a more effective leadership role, a big brother role, and frankly, we in Jakarta and people in Singapore are not necessarily always that comfortable with that assertion. So we'll have this discussion later on. But and you can notice that the expectations of ASEAN, managing expectations, Ibu Shanti is calling for an even more radical integration of ASEAN. You're actually effectively calling for a common foreign and defense policy. Yeah. So
one more comment, Ibu Devi. The statement I must correct here that Ibu Shanti made. India did not manage to join RCEP. Absolutely wrong. India decided not to join RCEP. Please correct that.
Yeah, we'll have your right of reply later on, I think. Yeah. But as you know, some people in civil society they tend to call a spade a spade. But you know, but this is interesting, you know, for the expectation of Indonesia's leadership role, whether Indonesia being more like a big brother, and what kind of big brother, will actually will be conducive to building trust and collaboration, or whether it be actually be counterproductive. That will also be discussions. But Sachin, are we calling our virtual speaker now or later?
The virtual speaker wants to be an observer.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, in that.
So we'll just continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in that case, then we have more time for discussions, because
That's right.
I also like to engage people from the real world, from the business later on, you know, if possible. But we have Pak Shoaib Kagda here, and then after that we'll go to Ambassador Manoj. Shoaib.
Thank you, Ibu Devi. A very warm good morning to all of you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've noted, and it goes without saying, that we really are living in a new era. You know, G20, I think, brought together many of the despairing voices and nations around the world, and I think kudos to Indonesia. I joined in congratulating Indonesia in hosting a very successful G20. I would say I've been living in Indonesia for some time now, and this really was, I mean, Indonesia hit the ball out of the park really with the G20. And I think in its leadership with ASEAN too, Indonesia always tends to deliver more than the promise. So I think that again will continue. I think everybody's been talking a lot about, you know, partnering with, at a very high altitude. I'd like to bring it down a little bit to the ground, in the sense that I now represent the Singapore Management University. SMU has just opened its first overseas center in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And I think this kind of points to another important step within ASEAN in terms of where educational institutions should be collaborating more closely. We tend to think very high level, but you know, Ibu Retno mentioned that we need to build trust within ASEAN. I think we're better to build trust than our youth, to start with them. SMU will be striving to do a lot more engagement with Indonesia starting now. And then we'll be also looking to build similar centers around in different ASEAN countries. But I think youth engagement, where we can bring youth together, whether it be student exchange programs, whether it be internships. This is one of the key points. You know, it's so difficult to bring interns into Indonesia and vice versa. Why is it so difficult? You know, I think that would really move the needle in terms of fostering this trust and this collaboration, and have a better understanding amongst us. I think institutions, educational institutions also should be collaborating a lot more deeply. Just speaking from my perspective, it seems that we always look very far afield to form partnerships. You know, we're trying to go to the US or to Europe. Why don't we look into the region, our neighborhood? Why don't institutions in Indonesia collaborate jointly with other ASEAN partners, ASEAN countries? We just don't have that connectivity. And I think, I would hope that Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN would put this on the table. How do we foster greater interaction, collaboration, and exchange amongst the educational institution and our youth? It's always kind of mentioned, but you know, we don't really have solid initiatives on the ground. And I think this could be something. I think I speak, my senior vice president Hugh is here, I'm going to speak for him. This is something that SMU, I think, would like to lead in this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You mentioned how it's very difficult to get interns to Indonesia. Yeah, Indonesia, as you know, is very protectionist lately, and it's now only beginning to open up. So this is something that we need to look at. But you're very right that when we are talking about building community, people-to-people exchanges are very important. And also, Ibu Shanti mentioned about mutual recognition agreement. We talk, but we don't walk the talk. We don't really walk the walk yet. Yeah, that is a very contested issue. These are areas that we can discuss further. Are you willing to jump in now, or do you want to go? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So the next, but not from the allotted trigger speakers, will be Ambassador Manoj Bharti, the Ambassador of India to Indonesia. Okay.
Thank you, Ibu Devi. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen around this table. It's good to hear different views before I speak. Being the last speaker, I like to take it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. We have seen all levels of discussion, and Ibu Shoaib just mentioned that he will like to come down to the ground and speak of few things. I like to go up in the sky and give you a bird's eye perspective of the situation. And this is actually India's takeaway from G20. We have seen that Indonesia has very successfully conducted the G20 presidency. And I have absolutely no doubt that Indonesia will do a wonderful job of its ASEAN presidency. I am sure all of us realize that India had throughout supported India's presidency in various ministerial level and other working group meetings. Even at the summit level negotiations, India and Indian team, the Indian Sherpa, had played a key role in achieving the consensus that was finally brought in. But it was very clear during this presidency that the world is increasingly facing many challenges, starting from the pandemic, then environment, and then regional and other conflicts. Actually, we are too much stuck in our small deliberations, bilateral bickerings, and many other issues, and sometimes only talk in cosmetic terms of what actually is facing humanity. We are actually losing ground if we see from the perspective of our Mother Earth. We do not have any other planet to go to if something happens to the Earth. And whatever we do, multilateral, bilateral, whatever regional, we must keep this at the center of our discussion. This is what I'm going to spend a few minutes on. And before I go into the details, I like Sachin to play that video which was shown at the time of launching of our G20 presidency logo and theme. And then I'll say a few words about that to highlight as to what I mean, what I say.
India, home of 1.3 billion people, is a confluence of religions, traditions, and customs. A thriving global center of technology and the world's largest democracy. As one of the oldest civilizations in the world with a rich cultural heritage and diversity, and as the fifth largest economy in the world, India is proud to assume the presidency of G20. As the country blooms into a new era, we look to another poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from its challenges. Lotus, the national flower of India, representing our culture, history, and heritage. a poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from its challenges. And the inspiration for India's G20 logo design. The design, rendered in saffron, white, green and blue, is drawn from the national flag of India. The 7 petals in the logo signify the 7 seas and the coming together of 7 continents at G20 India 2023. Sitting above the lotus is a representation of the earth, reflecting India's pro-planet approach to life and seeing the world as one family. From this, we derive the theme for G20 India 2023, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. A theme that brings the G20's focus on shared global growth, while being in harmony with nature. G20 India 2023. One earth, one family, one future.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Thank you. At the launch ceremony, Prime Minister Modi mentioned that we do not believe in the first world or the third world. We believe in one world. And India, whatever progress India makes for itself, it always intends to take that progress outside India for the benefit of others who require it. That has been our motto. I can give you an example of ITEC scholarship programs. ITEC is called Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation. It started in 1966 when India itself was very poor. But we had a lot of knowledge to share. And we gave this scholarship to developing countries, other developing countries. And we spent millions of dollars over these last 67 or 75 years on these programs. This is just an example. Now, you have seen the logo or the theme, which comes from an ancient wisdom of India in shloka in Sanskrit, which says, Ayam nijah paroveti gadana laghuchetasam udar charita nam tu vasudhaiv kutumbakam. It means this is mine and that is yours is a thinking of narrow-minded people. People with wider perspective consider the entire world as one family. And we have then added this concept of sustainability to say that what we mean is one earth, one family, one future. Unless we work and take these challenges as one family, we will not be able to survive the future. Now, with this, I would like to add that the role of Indonesia in ASEAN is quite central to this region's progress and stability. India has always strongly supported the concept of ASEAN centrality and unity for regional cooperation. Moreover, it will be essential to stay committed towards a workable consensus-based solution to address the impact of the ongoing climate and geopolitical challenges of the world. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on that beautiful logo.
Thank you.
I think that is building up from recover together, recover stronger to our one earth, one family, and one future. So that the coming G20 from Asian countries really emphasize this our spirit of togetherness, in contrast to the current divisions and sharpening polarization in the geopolitics. And I think that's very important. That while we bicker, it's like Lilliput's, on our small concerns. We are all sharing the same planet Earth. Now, we have, if you listen to most of the discussions, have focused on more diplomatic issues, on the more normative things, for example. Now, I'm sure that there are also perspectives from people from business about how do the business community see the takeaways from the G20, how that could be carried through in Indonesia's economic development, and also within the ASEAN economic community. The Secretary General has already highlighted some areas, and there's been some bits and pieces here. But I would like to invite the people from around the table, maybe focus more on the more economic dimensions, particularly for the Indonesian development. Is there any takers? Yes, please. Thank you. Introduce yourself. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nalin Singh. I'm CEO of Orbit Future Academy, a skilling company. In my 30 years, I've never been to a conference when we were not living in challenging times and we did not have a war going on. It's always been there. My perspective of business is a little selfish. I have probably 10, 20 years more to live with a business lifespan of 5 to 7. And what I have noticed, it's just a perspective that after the pandemic, while everybody's empathy levels, etc., have gone up, businesses and countries have closed down and become more protectionist. It's become harder, not easier. At the risk of sounding banal, all the people who came for G20 from India could not get a direct flight to Indonesia. And next year, we won't get a direct flight to India. That's one of the as low a level you can get to. And I know it's being sorted out, and it will get sorted out. To Shoaib's point of closed economies from a talent perspective, etc., not just talent. If you take startups, after all, the young people today, there aren't enough government jobs. And even in the private sector, jobs are receding due to automation, and there's a huge need to skill everybody up. So the young people are choosing entrepreneurship more out of compulsion than choice. Even there, we don't see enough partnerships. India and Indonesia being one of the top 10 startup countries in the world, India being number 2. Even there, you don't see enough exchange, enough ideas being exchanged, etc. In the skilling area, we see divergent views, right? Early education is almost always controlled by the government in almost all countries. And Indonesia is going through a huge revolution in its education system right now with a huge positive impact. And later part of education is after, the graduation level is just thrown away. Either the private sector takes it up or people find their own way. And I think that is one area where there is a huge opportunity for people to collaborate. The startup area and the higher education, which is after the formal education part of it. The skilling piece. Young people today don't have the patience to go through 3 to 5 years of expensive education and then find themselves without a job. Everything has to have an outcome. If I bought a mobile phone and I couldn't make calls from it, I would ask for a refund. People who go to university and don't get a job after that should get a refund. It's just a perspective I want to share.
Thank you. That's a sobering reality that connectivity has been a real challenge. No direct flights, and you're right. The exchanges between youth have been impossible, and youth are being forced to be more entrepreneurial because in the formal sectors it's not been as easy. I'd like to invite more comments from around the floor. You'd like to say something?
Sure, thank you. My name is Robert from Microsoft. I lead our higher education focus for Asia Pacific and partner closely with Nayland and others. And I'd like to pick up on those themes. I heard a lot about the opportunity for digital transformation as a distinct theme. And one of the number one challenges we are seeing as an organisation globally in our customers and enabling them to become technology organisations, as every commercial organisation will, is that lack of talent and human capital available to drive that. Selfishly for us, it's an imperative. We cannot thrive or survive without the talent pool of human capital capable of executing those transformations in countries. And that's both from a technical perspective and being able to use, adopt, execute technology transformation or digital transformation, but also those that can harness the power of technology as well. And for us, seeing the opportunities to really break down that technical skilling versus digital capabilities that everybody needs. And whether that be graduates today or reskilling the workforce, I think there's a huge opportunity. And then for that, I'd like to build on that theme of collaboration across ASEAN in this space. Naively, my first trip to Surabaya in Indonesia, I saw all of the Australian university logos that I'm used to seeing. We've got Monash Uni, there's other Australian universities. And I don't want to speak ill of anyone, but from a business model perspective, reaching out and attracting overseas students. It's a commercial reality. What is the opportunity if we look at the tertiary education system here in Indonesia, essentially being blown up, potentially outsourced, potentially collaborative with industry? I think there's some really innovative things happening, and there are other countries across ASEAN doing the same thing. My fear is we spend 3 to 5 years reinvigorating those ecosystems in country, and we miss that opportunity for further collaboration. So I do genuinely feel if we can build that human capital pipeline, we can affect the other priorities across ASEAN that we've spoken about earlier today, and allow the embracing of technology, the right or appropriate use of technology. We still have questions there, and that's why I really would build on that. It's not just a technical piece, it's ask not what technology can do, but what technology should do, and take the measured approach there. And then ultimately the opportunity to drive entrepreneurship and startups as well. We've seen success here in Indonesia, we've seen success across ASEAN. How do we accelerate that? How do we incubate that? And from a technology company, how do we support that as well? It's probably more of an open question than something we have a view on. But I think at an ASEAN scale, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. I think there's huge opportunity to go much further. But happy to sort of continue the dialogue and understand how we could be helping as well.
Can I comment on that? Yeah, sure. We will have free for all now. Yeah.
So just briefly on that, Robert, I think you made a very good point here. For the last 5 to 7 years, we have seen how people will focus more on upskilling. 3 years, it moved to reskilling. The future would need a new shape of skill, right? We need generations who are future ready. And when we say future ready, it can be anything. Academics, education is now in question. I mean, I'll tell my nieces and nephews, yeah, you need to pass, but you don't have to be the brightest in the class, because there are other classrooms outside of the normal schools and universities, which is life. And that is something that is lacking, right? People focus more on theories, on books and all those things, and then today we see the world in which we are today, and then we realize we did something wrong. Something was not right. I mean, how come these people are not ready? What do we need to do? Because the development is so fast, technology is moving so quickly, people fall out of the wagon, and then they hope the government will do something for them, right? Like, okay, why have I fallen? I couldn't find anything, right? So the point I think we need to also look into, and this is also at ASEAN level, is that how do we make ASEAN ready, future ready skill force, number one. Number two, this is not just the job of the government. This is not the responsibility of the government. This is our responsibility. We need to loop in businesses into this. We need to have people working at the offices. I let my nephew come and work with me in the office. I make him do my office work now because he needs to understand how business work, right? Now, how many people are like that who really get into the theory is good, but then you need to balance the practical side of it. I think if we could, at ASEAN level, loop in multinational companies during the ASEAN chairmanship and say each multinational companies needs to have people from a certain age to a certain age working in their company for a period of time. And I'm not just talking people who are graduating. I'm talking about people who are even 15, 17 years old, 12 years old. They need to be exposed to what business looks like, how to run a business, because it's very much different from what they learn in the classroom. I think this is something that we need to sit and take a totally new look at. Thank you.
Thank you. That's always been the case. The complaint of the real sector has always been that the graduates are not employment ready. And it's always been, that's why you need the training and so on. But this is even more radical because of these advancements of technology and so on. And Robert's point about the need for talent pool, well, this is a real opportunity. Indians have been exporting the talent pool. Well, Indonesia is a major importer with that, but we need to expand this also within ASEAN. You have something to add?
Yeah, I would love to add a small comment out there. So, my name is Rajiv, and I'm one of the young startup entrepreneurs from India who is probably trying to work with global companies across the globe. And what is very interesting about Indonesia and ASEAN that I see is the digital technology adoption and the G2's theme of digital transformation as a key pillar for growth resonates really well, and I feel that is the most important pillar which can help really create impact for humans around the world. Because if you talk about any benefit scheme or anything that the government is willing to launch, including education, for it to reach the last person today, you need digital technologies. And today, thanks to the mobile adoption and 5G technologies and invent of internet, we are able to reach there. Today, you can see it by the growth of simple applications like your YouTubes and other applications that everybody is using today. Knowledge is available. Knowledge is definitely available. There are so many different applications that provide you specialized knowledge. Even if you want to talk about emerging technologies like artificial intelligence or machine learning and others, there are people who are able to offer it from universities around the world, and it can reach the last mile today. But what is lacking is exposure. So how do people know what to choose, what to study? Today, a student living in a remote village can access basics of multiple technologies, multiple businesses. And to your point, the only way it can emerge and go up is when education systems enable people to find out the right knowledge and learn about them. Second, promote real world working experience. As Shanti said, we need people to work more when they are young, and that is when they get exposed to the world. We already see that there are tools that we use today are coming from the world over, right? For example, conferencing tool we are using is Zoom today, and we are sitting on cloud that is adopted by everybody. So what it means is international businesses, international products are accessible to people today in the country. But what needs to change is how do we take that knowledge and create impact by creating better entrepreneurs. So this boils down to how universities transform entrepreneurship as well. How do you promote entrepreneurship without having the risk or downside? Why do people not choose it as a course, or why do not people choose it as an opportunity to work when they are young? So if we address these things, I believe that the digital divide is gone, knowledge is available around the world. We make it easy for knowledge transfer to happen between countries that are emerging with countries that have already emerged a little bit further. So simple examples, coming to India's example, where technologies like UPI have literally transformed the way people can transact, okay? And this is as simple as transferring money from peer-to-peer to peer-to businesses or business to businesses. So that level of technology knowledge, if it's shared around the world, make it borderless for impactful technologies to be available around the world, I think will have significant impact and growth for humanity.
Out of the various outcomes of the G20, the digital transformation is considered to be the key leverage where this is a critical point, not just about the infrastructure, but clearly which will take longer is actually creating that talent pool, the human resources, and this is in fact an area of cooperation which we can take into ASEAN, because ASEAN also has its connectivity issues, including the digital transformation issue. This is one homework that the Indonesian chairmanship,
Thank you, Ibu Dewi. Very interesting discussion. Just want to say a couple of points. ASEAN is now doing digital as well as a green transition. We have taken heed of the many challenges we're facing, and I think the pandemic has accelerated both trends. And something that must be said for ASEAN, we set a lot of norms and standards for our region. We have a digital framework. We are working on a low carbon net zero framework. We're doing ECG work. We're working on carbon credits. So ASEAN as a intergovernmental platform, we are setting many baselines for our region. For example, we have set minimum standards for food products, poultry and eggs, so that everyone can be assured that they're eating safe food. We're putting in place a lot of measures to ensure supply chain resilience, and also to work on vaccine production, pandemic resilience. So the work we're doing isn't immediately felt by people. I think where we need to work harder is to put out a narrative about why ASEAN matters, and that will come in the Indonesian chairmanship. On digitalization, I'd just like to point out that our region has been growing very fast in terms of digital users as well as the digital economy. Every year there is a study put out by Google, Temasek and Bain, and this year's report shows that we have already achieved 194 billion e-economy. And we're going to hit our target of 330 billion by 2025. This is like 5 years sooner than expected, propelled largely by the pandemic, because during the last 2 years, I think about 40 million more Southeast Asia citizens came online, because it's like you have to go digital or you die. On the future of work, I think jobs and education are foremost on all governments' minds. Let me assure you, and nowhere more so than Southeast Asia with our very large youth population. I think what we're trying to do is to move to a mindset of lifelong learning. Not just formal education for your first 16 years and then off you go. No, you've got to continually skill and reskill yourself. And I think that's what we're doing in ASEAN. And I have to do a bit of advertising for my country. We have something called the Center for the Future of Work, where we are looking deep, we're doing deep studies into how to ensure that kids start out with a level playing field, and how we can help them continue to skill up as they grow up. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive comments. But I think that we recognize the challenges that we face, particularly for big countries like Indonesia, because the digital divide is a reality, and it's not just owning the phones, but the digital literacy is a major issue. Sachin, I see so many hands around the floor, but you've only given us 10, and it's now 10:31. So
we have time till 10:45.
10:45. So I will take the. How many hands, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 2 minutes each maximum. And then I'm going to ask you to put on Lam's Castle remark, okay?
Yeah.
That means that you'll cut your coffee short, right? The gentleman in blue shirt first. Did you put up your hand? Oh, you didn't put up. Okay, yeah. Again, okay.
So very quickly, a few points. So if you look at the demography of the world right now, most of the young people are in this part of the world. So they are going to fulfill the demands of jobs of the future. If you look at the jobs of the future, which is very different from Industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, which was physical labor of some form or the other, the jobs of the future require people to have technological skills of some kind. Because digital does not mean you can use Instagram, right? There's a whole host of other things. And training people on technology and using it is much tougher than what people were used to in the past. And the final point I want to make there is, all this digitization and growth of the global economy, the job growth has not kept up with that. So it is jobless growth in some sense. And if all the demography of young people is here, do we risk having a very large population of young people who are dissatisfied and jobless? Because we are going all digital at the pace. I'm just questioning the pace, not the direction. I'm just questioning the pace. When a young person's job and livelihood, whole economic future is dependent on those first 5 to 10 years, is that pace right or wrong? I think that is a question every country has to answer for itself.
Because now organizing a revolution is also much easier. And when young people are well-informed and jobless, that's the start of social problems that we have. And next one? Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you. My name's Hugh Edmiston, and I'm lucky enough to work for Singapore Management University. Just a couple of quick comments. I don't think we actually realise the challenges that we're facing at this moment in time, if I'm honest. I don't think we think through the unintended consequences well enough. We talk about technology, digitalization, artificial intelligence, and I don't think we actually understand those technologies properly and what they are capable of actually delivering and how they will impact on social infrastructure, people, communities, etc. The second thing is I think the young people are already dissatisfied. In actual fact, I think their universities, and I work for one, I think our model has to evolve significantly. I think we are probably 30 to 40 years out of date in terms of where we need to be, and we can talk about that in the next session. The other thing I also want to highlight is I think the economic model is broken. What was created by Adam Smith from Edinburgh is fundamentally flawed now, and so even if we get through this economic crisis and we see another period of prosperity, what worries me is that the tsunami that follows after that, because if you look at the economic cycles, the amplitudes are getting much higher and much shorter. So we fundamentally have to change how we value things. And that leads me into business then. So at the moment, how do we value a business? It's by the shareholder return. And I think we have to go well beyond that. And I think, that's where humanity actually has to mature and actually has to stop focusing on getting rich, but also think about the broader aspects in terms of how we measure value. Thank you.
Thank you. It is scary. Remember, when we first had this technology, social media, everyone was so excited. This is 3.0 democracy. The people could directly manage the democracy and direct communication and everything, level playing field, and we only saw the positive sides. I'm not an economist, but in the political side, we've seen the negative impacts also. So we don't really understand the power of the technology, the goods and the bads that they can do, and clearly, when you're talking about talent pool, it's not just about creating and operating it, but being socially aware also, of what the positive and negative implications. You're next. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Budewi. My name is Sugianto. I work for Castle Asia. We run Indonesia Country Program. I'm not a businessman, but we heard a lot talks from business people. One of the big things, of course, have been mentioned here repeatedly is talent and education. It's crucial, And I'd like to say that now I'm a proud Indonesian because G20, how the government has successfully conducted it, and this is amidst, as Pak Arto said, unprecedented challenges globally, but still we made it through. And I'd like to refer to The Economist's excellent report about Indonesia, which highlighted that we are poised to boom, but politics permitting. I think this is key to highlight the issue with developing our future, especially with the young people. We mentioned about the need to follow up on the G20 achievements so far, and also to extend it further so it's relevant to laypersons. And schools, I think we haven't mentioned, we've mentioned university schooling, secondary schools, where 50, 60 young Indonesians are now studying. Actually, one of the things that is lacking is global citizenship education. This is key, I think, challenges ahead if this could be further discussed in the next Asian meeting, and then somehow a way is found to ensure that global citizenship is mainstreamed in our education system regionally. It will make a big difference. And one of the things that I mentioned, politics permitting, is how the teaching force in Indonesia, for instance, is still fraught with the mindsets where die-hard nationalistic and religious chauvinistic leanings are still quite strong. You see, the young generation is only as good, or will be as good as how they are being taught and raised in the present. And that is certainly a big challenge. You know, we, as Bu Dewi said, we can make revolution easily, digitally, but we don't want that. We want a young generation that could embrace the world and engage, fruitfully going forward. I think that's, one of the big tasks ahead for Indonesia's leadership next year, too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Sugianto. So how to make us more confident as a global citizen without losing our roots. That is a challenge. And your point about being narrow nationalism, and this is not just about Indonesia. After all, we saw this happening in the United States, in Europe, and so on. This is a major challenge. There's always action and reaction. Too much globalization, there's a reaction. But now, too much reaction, we need to find a balance again. And for Indonesia, that's always been critical. We're always very good at holding a party, but what's next? Yeah, and that is a challenge for us. But I'm too much time. But it's only one. Is it two ladies? Yeah, Sachin. Yeah, because there's been no lady so far besides myself and Bu Retno. So
absolutely.
Chandi. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. I'm Poonam Sagar, and I'm just very happy about the fact that we're talking about education in a library. And as to mention what Rajiv said about how everything is now available to everybody who has access to a mobile device and internet, but it's the same thing here. We have access to all this library, but we don't have access to what's inside them. And we definitely need universities to create a structured manner in which we can get the right knowledge which is suitable for whatever talent that needs to be developed. So, this is where this connectivity comes in to bring that structured approach to get that right knowledge to the right person. And my second point is about health. We've spoken a lot about digital transformation and education, but we've sadly missed out on health. With BPJS in Indonesia, healthcare is accessible to everybody. However, the talent pool for healthcare is very limited. most people who can afford it either go to Singapore or Malaysia or Thailand or even to India, which is a pity. And talking about MRA and talking about mutual recognition agreement, I think we should, in a way, foster this cooperation for healthcare to become even more accessible and of better quality in Indonesia.
Well, Indonesia, as you know, is very protectionist, and education is opening the window, not the door yet, but health, the locks and the bolts are still there. So, next.
My name is Seema. I'm a foreign legal consultant with the Sagita Rijab Shah and Partners. I've been in Indonesia for the last 16 years. And I'll keep it very short. Having been here for 16 years, the trend or the interest in Indonesia has moved on from energy resources, which is still there. But the trend, what I see from my clients here right now, is technology. I have a few clients who are investing in Indonesia in the technology area, in the IT sector. But the concern remains the talent for them. And to that extent, I would only probably add to what everybody expressed here, that Indonesia and India could collaborate here together, because India is far ahead in technology and it's exporting human resources in that area, and Indonesia could learn a lot from what India has done right in that area to prepare its future generation to take on the technology, because the pace is very fast. I can see the interest in Indonesia is a lot, and a lot of companies are from India who are looking at investing in this area. So I would probably impress upon the governments as well as private sectors to work together, because it's not a one private sector to do its job or the government to do its job. It has to be both from all sides. So that's just my comment, and I would leave it there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a very rich discussion. We are, in fact, going over time. But I will not try to summarize the discussions, because the G20 itself is very rich, and then coming to ASEAN, it's also very rich. But the key takeaways from this is we're going not just G20, Indonesia and ASEAN, but the bilaterals between Indonesia and India, where there's still a lot of potentials. We have our comprehensive strategic partnerships, but compared to a lot of other bilateral relations that we have, this is still, there's a huge gap between the expressions than the actual work. We talk about our 2 million years of relations, of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, but when it comes to opening each other's market, it's a tough nut to crack. And clearly, whether we talk about health, whether we talk about energy, whether we talk about digital transformation, at the center is the people. And at the center, the key enablers would be the participations of young people. And then, of course, the key would be education and training. And for Indonesia, I think that is, we talk about this. If you look at the PISA scores, how Indonesia is doing, we are among the lowest. Within ASEAN, if East Timor comes in, then Indonesia will be number 10, East Timor will be number 11, But, we make jokes about this, but this is a reality. And if Indonesia doesn't want to be caught in this perpetual middle-income trap, the issues of education, creating the human resources is really key. And I hope that, that we will continue to focus this, whether it's within bilateral relations, within ASEAN, where Singapore has a huge responsibility to play as a knowledge hub as well. And SMU opening here is a welcome development. Clearly, SMU is able to come here. It's not because SMU is clever, but because the Indonesian government is beginning to be much more relaxed about it. And this is our challenge, where, the challenge of nationalism sometimes makes us very inward-looking and very, very unwilling to open up, because we see ourselves a huge market and as only as consumers rather than as producers. And clearly, collaboration between the government, the business, and education, the triple helix, where we talk about it, but in reality, it's never that easy. So I would like to thank all of you, all the participants, and including those who are observing online as well, for participating in this important discussions from G20 and to ASEAN key takeaways, and give all of us a big hand. Yeah. Thank you very much.